Welcome back to the NoFX podcast. I'm your host, Izlain, and I'm joined once again by my co-host, Kirkules.
Hello, everyone.
What's up, man? How are you doing?
Hanging in there, not too bad. Excited for the new set. How about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, it is spoiler season, or the end. The spoiler season just ended again, but it's about to be spoiler season for the next set, which comes
Yeah,
out like
give it a week.
4 spoiler season basically never ends, but here we are. Either way, the new set that is coming out on the 10th of February, I believe, is called Phyrexia All Will Be One, and is a culmination of some stuff that they've been bringing out for the last, what's it been, year or two? Since Kaldheim, basically, when Vorinclex made a new appearance, and then since then we've seen all of the other Praetors on different planes, and kind of unexplained how they got there, but I think that's what this is supposed to wrap up and kind of bring us full circle with Elish Norn being the newest Praetor to join the fray. Yeah, so we basically wanted to get together and talk about what we thought some of the best cards from the set were from a cEDH standpoint. We have a top 10, so to speak, but it's not necessarily in any particular order. We did order them, but your mileage may vary as it were. So basically, we have a few cards to talk about, and then also a few honorable mentions that didn't quite make the cut, but are still cards that we wanted to talk about because they actually might have some sort of impact in cEDH
Right. And
somewhere.
and to
A
be
little more
fair,
niche.
a lot of these are cards we're excited about, whether they either have an existing home in a cEDH deck that's just an upgrade, or whether this is something that could possibly build around or spurn a new archetype, or could just be something that we think has got potential that's untapped. So we shall see.
Right. So, without further ado, we're just going to jump right in here. And first up on our list, we've got a handful of honorable mentions that probably, some of these are, they might see some cEDH play, specifically because of me. But outside of that, maybe not. So first one up here is the Necrogen Rot Priest. Now, this I know is not going to see any sort of cEDH play unless a toxic build, comes to the forefront. But I actually like this for cPDH, which is the popper version of comp. So it's a 1/5 for 2 and a black and a green. It's a Phyrexian zombie cleric. It has Toxic 2, and Toxic is basically the new version of Infect, where instead of with Infect, if you dealt damage to any creature, it was basically Wither, so it gives a -1/-1 counter on that creature instead of dealing the damage. If they hit a player, instead of dealing damage, you got that many poison counters equal to the power of the creature that was hitting you. In the case of Toxic, it's been reworked to the point where you only get the amount of poison counters equal to whatever its toxic number is. So in this case, it's Toxic 2. So even though this is a 1/5, it still deals combat damage, which is notable. So if this guy gets in at you for a damage, you take the 1 damage, and then you also get 2 poison counters. So it's a little bit different, but it's still the same idea. It's the same family. It's close.
And
So
for us old
they are
players,
related.
it's like a throwback to, I think was it Venomous way back in the day.
Poisonous.
Poisonous,
Poisonous,
something
yeah.
from
There
something I
was
didn't see play back then. Yeah.
there's a sliver that I can think of off the top of my head. I think it was Future Sight, that had Poisonous 1 or 2 or something, and it basically said, like, if this deals damage to a player, it gets that many counters. I'm pretty sure it was still on damage trigger as well, but either way. So this has Toxic 2, and it says whenever a creature you control with Toxic deals combat damage to a player, that player gets an additional poison counter. It also has an activated ability for 1 black and green. The target creature you control with Toxic gains Death Touch on a turn, which is cool for trying to get through bigger blockers. But generally speaking, probably doesn't get used all that much. Again, for me, this was a popper thing because it's an uncommon creature that can be used as your commander. Obviously, you can't do that in regular old cEDH. So the only reason I wanted to bring it up is because I've built a list with it, and I'll be playing it on stream sooner than later. So keep your eyes peeled for that. But generally, I think Toxic is a cool idea. I've always liked Infect. I've always wanted to try and make it work, but it's just never worked well enough in multiplayer because you have too many people to try and kill with it. So here's hoping that maybe with the combination of Toxic and Effect stuff, maybe at some point somebody can do something to get it viable.
The toughest part about that too is your opponents damaging your other opponents doesn't help. Whereas, you know, with regular combat damage, hey, 30 is 20 is 10 is 5, you know, it doesn't matter who's dealing the damage. With Toxic and with Infect and with all this, it's you got to be the one doing it all, unless they're also running an Infect or Toxic deck, which is most likely unlikely. So it's a little trickier.
Right. So this wasn't the next one on the list, but I'm just going to go straight to it anyway because it's relevant to this part of the discussion. Karumonix, the Rat King. It's a 3/3 1/2 black. It has Toxic 1 itself, but other rats you control have Toxic 1. So I've built rat decks in the past. Lots of people have. You can play that in Pauper. You can play that in regular EDH. It's never been cEDH viable. But I'm attempting to make this into a cEDH deck anyway, because the curve is low because of having like 25 Crypt Rats. And with every creature you control having Toxic, it feels blanket enough to where you might actually be able to kill 1 or 2 people before somebody combos off. But in practice, most of the time, you're probably just going to lose on turn 2 or 3 and not do shit. So competitively viable, probably not, but I still like playing shit to the highest level I can, and it's fun. This guy also has the added effect of on ETB, you look at the top 5 of your library, and you can reveal any number of rats and put them in your hand. I test played this one time and cast him a total of 3 times in one game, and managed to get, I think, a total of like 6 rats into my hand. So it is some form of card advantage if the deck's built right. And then just having the blanket Toxic to everything is pretty good. I found some new tech today. There's an old cycle of cards that were I don't remember the set, like Onslaught maybe. It's old, like late 90s, early 2000s, but they had like a little tombstone up in the corner of the card, like Brawn is part of the cycle. There's a other green one too, but anyhow, if it's in your graveyard and you control a swamp, all of your creatures have Swamp Walk. I'm also running Urborg, so if you can get Urborg down and everybody has swamps, and then you can entomb that and give all your creatures Swamp Walk, well, now you have to do is hit everybody for 10, and that makes it pretty decent. The problem is it's not in colors for stacks to slow the game down.
Do you play the 1/1 black changeling unblockable in your deck in that deck build? I'm curious.
Changeling out. Okay, actually, I hadn't thought of that. That's actually probably a good ad. It's pretty good ad in most decks that care about, unblockability and changeling, but yeah. Anyhow, again, another card that's probably going to be best served in casual, but here we are. We've got a couple more for the honorable mention slot here. This was one that Kirk was more excited about. I kind of glanced over it, but cool card nonetheless. It's called the Mycosynth Gardens. It's a land. It comes in untapped, notably. It taps for colorless, or you can filter mana by tapping a generic and it to get a mana of any color, which can be useful in higher color decks, or even just 2-3 color decks where you just need the fix. But notably, it has X tap. It becomes a copy of target non-token artifact you control with mana value X. So you have to, if you want to make it into a mana crypt, you don't have to pay much. You just tap it. But if you want to make it into, Soul Ring, you're gonna have to pay 1 and tap it, so on and so forth. So it is essentially a copy artifact, but has the limitation that it can't target other people's stuff, which, if you're playing copy artifact, you probably don't play this, but if you're not, this might be good.
I was thinking about this in like a deck where you'd want to copy and like an Ethersorn Canonist, just to have another stacks piece that's hard to remove, or Isochron Scepter. If you want to go that, ISO Rev Swan Song win combo, this would be a perfect way to do that. You can play your Isocron Scepter early with Swan Song imprinted and play this later. It's got some strong possibilities. We'll see if it sees much play, but I like it.
I mean, utility lands are always things that people want,
Right.
and if you're in a artifact heavy list or just a list that cares about a particular artifact or two, I would say you probably want to have at least a couple different things that you actually want to target this with. But then again, every mana rock is probably good, especially if it goes from only tapping for one colorless to now it's a mana crypt and it taps for two colorless. That's not bad. And it's not till end of turn or anything, so that is cool too. And you can switch it at will. So there's a lot of possibilities, but we'll see what the brewers out there come up with. Another one is Canker Bloom. This is also another creature. It's a 3/2 for 1 and a green. You can pay 1, sack it, choose 1, destroy an artifact, destroy an enchantment, or proliferate. So it's essentially similar to things like Cathar Commando or the
Outland
Green
Liberator.
Werewolf. Yeah, Outland Liberator. Both of which have smaller bodies. One has flash, the other has the day-night shit that you have to deal with. On the backside of that werewolf, though, it is notably better just because it's got a Kogla attack trigger where it blows up stuff. However, some decks may actually want the proliferate ability. And as you pointed out, it's a 3/2 body, so a little bit bigger, and then also has the... there was something you said about like deflecting SWAT.
Yeah, so it's modal, so you choose to destroy an artifact or choose to destroy an enchantment. It's 2 separate modes. So unlike like Outland Liberator, it's sack it, destroy target artifact or enchantment. This one, you choose the mode when you do it. So unless I'm incorrect, you can't deflecting swat. If I choose to destroy target Rhystic Studies, an enchantment, they can't deflecting swat it and change it to an artifact because I've chosen enchantment as the mode. So that it could be relevant.
I think you're correct because deflecting SWAT reads, change target spell or abilities target with another target. So yeah,
it's kind
you
of,
chose to destroy that target artifact.
Yeah.
They may be able to change it to another artifact, but it may or may not, matter to you at that point.
Right. Yeah.
Or they just don't do it because they're scared of, wasting the spell.
Right. I was thinking about this as a good fit to try out in Animar. 1 green to cast this is insane in Animar. The proliferate might be relevant. The big body's always good. So that's the deck I was thinking of it for specifically, but I'm sure there will be others that might try it if there's any kind of a planeswalker control style deck that comes out, or if infect / toxic / whatever becomes a thing, I could see this definitely finding a home.
Even other, strategies that have, planeswalkers or 1/1 counters, just any sort of counters anywhere. This does that. And if you're in a deck that cares about that, this is just either removal or a bonus for you, and that's not bad.
And let's be real, the not having to track day and night, it's got an upside.
That is
too.
a thing.
Yeah.
That is a thing for sure. Okay, so next one on our honorable mentions list is Venerated Rot Priest. This is a 1/2 for 1 green. It has Toxic 1, and then whenever a creature you control becomes the target of a spell, target opponent gets a poison counter. So it doesn't even have to be the person that targets your creature. You just get to give out poison counters anytime any of your creatures are targeted.
And
now,
notably, it could be your own spells as well targeting it. So
sure. Now, in that case, you could potentially abuse this to just start eliminating people altogether. This could be the combo piece that makes Toxic work if you can find the right combination of colors and utilities and things. But I can't think of anything off the top of my head outside of... See, it's target of a spell. I wish it was target of a spell or ability, because then you could do like Cloudstorm Curio loops and just have this on the field and it just kills someone.
Well,
kills everyone.
It'd be just busted with like Lightning Greaves. You could just equip it over and over and kill everybody though. So that's why they had to nerf that.
Right.
Yeah, this one I think
that makes sense.
I don't think it has a home right now in our format, but if anything's going to enable it, this one might be a piece. So
yeah, that's the issue I think with Toxic as a whole, is that there's a lot of support in this set, but then outside of that, it's going back to Infect, and yes, those two things intertwine, but they're not necessarily both going to work all that well in a list together. I know from building that pauper list that I'm running both types, but there's obviously the limitation of commons only. But regardless, there's like only so much of it there, so you have to find ways to be able to apply it as much as possible. And I think that this could fit somewhere in some kind of combo. Somebody's just got to figure it out.
Sure.
Honestly, I mean,
there's
there's plenty of spells with buyback.
Yeah,
so I mean, you
if
could
they
literally
print a chain
just
of smog effect that you could repeat the target over and over type thing, then maybe that'd be a thing. But
that, or just like I said, any of the spells with buyback, you could theoretically like capsize something and then recast it, and then like if you, let's say you're in Teamer, you could capsize your dock side, give a poison counter out, recast your dock side to get enough mana to recast the capsize to do that over and over again. It's a lot of mana, but it's possible. I mean, there you go. I solved it.
You did it. You broke dockside. Good job.
Broke dockside again. Yeah, that's pretty much all I got to say about that one. We've got one more. This one you added, kind of sneak ninja'd in out of nowhere, and that's fine. It's Mere Convert. It's a 2/1 for 2 mana, 2 generic. It's an artifact creature. Toxic 1, so it still plays well with any of the toxic things that you may want to be doing, but has tap, pay 2 life, add 1 mana of any color. That's kind of cool for color fixing. I mean, you could slam that in a 5-color deck if you really needed to, just because it's another mana dork. Yes, you have to pay life for it, but it will fix you as needed, so that's not terrible.
Yeah, I think Winota
and then
will
having the toxic
this.
is just a benefit.
I think Winota will play this notably as better than Gold Mirror and Iron Mirror, just because it can produce either color, and it's a 2/1 body. It's bigger, so that's
so
where I
play Winota,
live.
and I don't play either of those mirror. I want to say people play the it's not
Ornithopter Repair.
Oh, it's the that red artifact creature Gold Hound or something, where you can sack it for
a gold treasure
token.
It's got menace or something.
Yeah, that one people were talking about in Winota and in like Nigila lists and stuff, and I think this is probably better than that too, because it's repeatable. You don't have to sack it to get the mana. So, and in Winota, paying life doesn't hurt you.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I think it's decent for Winota for sure.
And legit being a 2/1 body, if they're slamming a Blade Historian down, this matters. I mean, 4 damage adds up quick. So, or what's Rick? Does Rick only give your humans?
Rick is only humans, but yeah, Blade Historian like just does work regardless.
Yeah, so this is just extra chip damage. So
yeah. Okay, well that is it for our honorable mentions, and now we get into the meat and potatoes of the list. We have 10 here again. Notably, these are just put in an order that we kind of sort of agreed on together. That doesn't mean that this order has anything to do with playability, or even necessarily that this is the order we see them in. Your order may vary, but I've already seen some other people put out top 10 lists, and some of these cards are on it, and some of the cards they put on it were cards I never even looked at. So everybody's going to have their own opinion. We're hoping that we can just get kind of our opinion out there and give you guys something to chew on in the meantime. So this episode will probably be out right around the time that the set releases. So this is the kind of thing you can listen to and kind of get an idea of what's coming and what you might be wanting to look out for.
Yeah, you can laugh at us when we're wrong, and you can cheer us when we were right. Got them.
Hell yeah. So Kirk, you want to start us off with our number 10?
Absolutely. In this spot, we put Minor Misstep. It's 1 blue pip. It's an instant counter target spell with mana value 1 or less. It hits Pact of Negation. It hits LED, Profane Tutor if those Cody decks are still floating around in the meta.
They are from here and there. Yeah.
There you go. It's Jeweled Lotus. I mean, so this is a card I could see burning on turn 1 to kill somebody's mana ramp, whereas a lot of your other spells, like a Mental Misstep and stuff, you're probably not doing that. This one, I could see that being a thing. I mean, there's a billion 1-drops that are relevant in our format that this could help shut down. Izlain and I both agreed this one might not be better than your list of other possible miscasts, your dispels, your you name it, an offer you can't refuse. But it's worth mentioning because it's a 1 blue mana counter spell that stops good amount of cards that are played.
So it's niche, but I remember people like talking up. I think it's Spellstare that like hits a creature or something.
Uh,
Like I don't
it's a
remember.
2-drop, I think, for 1 blue, something
Yeah,
like that.
something like that. It was very niche as well, and people came up with their reasons why they should play it, and then everybody came up with the reasons why you shouldn't play it. This is one of those cards that's going to be polarizing in that some people are going to be like, yes, absolutely, I can Gemstone Caverns, have this up for turn 0, just the same as you can with a Mental Misstep. Uh, in the case of Mental Misstep, you don't have to have the gemstone. So like turn 1, this may or may not be the thing that happens. But well, the way I looked at it is that there are all of those options as far as the different counter spells, rocks, and things that are 0 cost that we don't really have counters for, unless you're willing to dump a Force of Will. And like, I'm not Force of Willing a mana crypt or anything like that. But I wouldn't mind paying 1 mana to do that. And I've mental misstepped my fair share of soul rings and things that have come down on turn 1, and it just, tempos somebody really hard. So in that case, it seems pretty good. But needing the gemstone to be able to do it turn 0 makes it to where it's less good. But late game, you can still have people that, turn 5 or 6 play a console and you can counter that. Or they play a vampiric tutor and you can counter that. So, I mean, it's still going to hit the majority of powerful things that people are doing in the format. The problem is, as Kirk mentioned, is that an offer you can't refuse is probably just better because this doesn't have the limitation of non-creature. This can actually hit creatures too, so you can burn out somebody's Dork or an Esper Sentinel or a Ragavan. So like, it's got a lot of options that make it seem really good. It's just a matter of, can you justify playing this over a Dispel or Spell Pierce or miscast or etc etc.
Right,
So
red elemental
you do
blast, blue
you,
elemental
and if you're
blast.
in a
Yeah,
very heavy counterspell deck, this may be something else you want to put in, but it may also be narrow enough to where you feel like every time it's in your hand you just don't do anything with it. And I feel that way with Mental Misstep sometimes. So the good thing
sure.
about Mental Misstep is it replaces itself with a draw, so
And
and then doesn't cost you any mana.
it's free. That's the biggest piece of it. I can see this living in a deck like Baral, Chief of Compliance. They might try this. Just slow, cheap interaction decks like that. So anyway,
There's definitely something to be said about being able to just counter Sensei's Divining Top too. I mean, there
right.
there's a lot of options, but again, your mileage may vary. I don't know if I can justify this in any of my lists currently. I'm thinking about it, but until I've really, a lot of these things, you just need your confirmation bias. Like, you put it in the list because you think you're smart and you think you know better, and then the thing happens and you're like, yes, I did it, and this is why I was right. And then the next 30 games you play, you never see it again, or you never see the right target, and it just sits dead in your hand, or you're discarding it, and then you're like, well, yeah, maybe I was wrong.
Yeah, I mean,
So
as they print more cards that are 1 cost or 0 cost that are more and more broken, we'll see if this gains traction at some point. I think right now, and Izlain and I both agree on this, it's probably on the outside looking in. I mean, I'm most likely going to play Days over this even, but who knows? Keep it on the back burner. As they print more cards and more 1 drops and more 0 drops will certainly be printed. This might gain some actual value and more playability. So we'll see.
yep, that's probably all there is to say about it. So moving on, number 9. This one is another one that's kind of iffy, but I still felt like it was worth mentioning. It's Malira, the Living Cure. That's a 3/3 for Selesnya, so a green and a white. It is a legendary creature, so it could be a commander, but I don't know that you're. Maybe it might be best as a commander just because you could do it over and over again. But that was not something I had thought about. But here we are. It does have kind of a weird built-in protection from toxic because her backstory is she's supposed to be impervious to the Phyrexian oil, or she's immune. So, but it says if you would get 1 or more poison counters, instead you get 1 poison counter, and you can't get additional poison counters this turn. So she has a little bit of inbuilt protection against all this toxic shit that's running around. More notably, she has an activated ability that says exile her, choose another target creature or artifact. When it's put into the graveyard this turn, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. So she can function as sort of a protection for a creature or artifact, giving them that undying stamina type effect where they die and they come right back. That's cool, but in the case of like Hulk decks, I think this is pretty good. I don't know that I would want to build just a plain old Selesnya Hulk, although you could definitely do it because the lines exist. Um, I don't know that I would put this in Minx Hulk either because there is Safi already. And this is essentially the same thing Safi has, except for Safi can get brought back by Gerard, and you need Naya colors to do that, and that's a whole loop, and it helps you end the game, which is great. In the case of this, though, I think if you are in a Selesnya Hulk build, this could be great because normally 9 times out of 10, you don't need more than 2 Hulk piles to win a game. So she does have to get exiled, but you've already gotten your 1 Hulk by sacking. You sacked it, and then you exile her to bring it back, and then you sack it again. So you will be able to get 2 activations of Hulk, which, like I said, is usually enough to just end the game. Particularly when the first one goes and gets Grand Abolisher or whatever. Now nobody can interact with you, and then the second one you go get your actual win cons, and you just go from there. I don't know that I would really want to play this as a commander. I don't think it's good enough. I would prefer to be in Naya or in some color with black because most of the best Hulk piles are in other colors. But as a secondary effect for Safi, again, can't be used with Gerard, but just as a 1 card, I can get 2 Hulk activations out of this thing. Not bad. I thought it was worth mentioning. I don't know if you have any further thoughts.
So there's, I mean, like there's like what, sleeper agent or activated sleeper or something that's the black creature that's kind of a similar idea. Granted, it's a 0/0 and it's a whole different deck, but I mean, with this one, you could sack it, like you said, get your Hulk back on your second sack of Hulk. You could go get Safi, and then you could just go deeper into the combo if you need. The big piece of this one I think is interesting that Safi doesn't do is this can return an artifact as well. So there might be something there. I haven't brewed with it yet to really, ramp up the brainstorm to see what I can figure out with that. But that could be something too. So
Yeah, and that was a point I meant to make as well, is that there is that extra clause. So there may be something that you could do with an artifact that could be abused, but I can't think of anything off the top of my head. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I just can't think of it right now. But more on that later as it develops, I suppose.
well, and like we talked about too, if someone can break the format with an infect toxic deck, then this could obviously get a bump in play. But we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, being able to protect yourself from poison in general, if that ends up being more, I don't honestly think it will happen right now, but because there's going to be another that March of the Machine expansion, which also has to do with the Phyrexians. Regardless, we may see more of this toxic printed, or more effects that are similar enough that they play well together. So it could become a thing. That is for sure. But moving on, Kirk, what's number 8?
It would be the set is named after this particular card, or vice versa. All will be one. 2 red, 3 colorless, an enchantment. Whenever you put 1 or more counters on a permanent or player, All Will Be One deals that much damage to target opponent, creature an opponent controls, or planeswalker an opponent controls. So the reason this is on the list is because there are a number of 1 card combos that can combo with this, where if you can sneak in 1 point of damage, you win. It can loop and put counters on, and loop and put counters on. The big one that came to mind, there's a commander that's already out there for this. The Red Terror, I think it's called. It's one of the 40k legends that combos with this. It's when a red source deals damage, you put counters on it, vice versa. So this enables a lot of just 1 card combos with it. Now it's in red, it's an enchantment, it's notoriously hard to tutor in just red. So, I mean, gamble is a little risky, but it's a thing, right?
Yeah.
We were talking about there could be some weird builds with Rakdos where your Enlightened Tutor can get this and or one of the other pieces if you draw this. So
there was also, we spoke about Plea for Guidance, because one of the cards that you mentioned that worked with this is another enchantment. So if you're in Boros or those 2 colors plus, you could potentially play Plea for Guidance. I think it's either 5 or 6 mana to cast. It's a sorcery, but it lets you tutor up 2 enchantments at the same time and put them in your hand. I believe you do have to reveal them, but either way, you would show this, you'd show the other thing. People would be like, okay, I don't know what you're doing with that. Or either that or it's blatantly obvious. One way or
Right.
the other, it's a lot of mana because you have to tutor them both at the same time, and then also it's kind of like doing tooth and nail at that point. It's like I'm paying a fuck ton of mana to get these two cards out, and then a fuck ton more mana to put them down. But then all I have to do is do 1 damage to anybody, and it goes off. So in
Right.
that case, it could be kind of janky. It's probably not gonna see a ton of play outside of people who specifically find ways to break it. But it is kind of just a blanket, damage over time. Granted, it does nothing for 5 mana, which is as a metric for cEDH, that's pretty much bad. Like if it's over if it's 5 mana or more, it should do something immediately impactful, which this does not. But maybe you've already set up for it, or like you said, you had so much mana that you were able to just do this and go off.
Yeah, I
But
think
just
the
anytime a counter goes on anything, it deals damage. So and you get to target it. It can be an opponent or a creature or a planeswalker. So you can get rid of problematic stuff. There's arguments to be made that you have this out and you're in like roll or something, and you do something that applies like 5+1/+1 counters to something, and now all of a sudden you blew up their planeswalker or their most threatening creature, or you just kill the guy that's down to 5 life because he had Nas the turn before and didn't win. So there are ways that this could be good, but it's probably a little bit on the jankier side and is going to need to be built around. But doesn't go
yeah.
without being mentioned because, well, A, it's the namesake of the set, and B, it does have some cool interactions.
Yeah, I think Quest for the Pure Flame is like the 1 red mana enchantment that combos with this. There's like War Elemental. There's
Yeah.
several. And what's that? There's the white creature that's like a 2/2 or 1/2. When it dies, you exile it and can tutor an enchantment straight to the battlefield. I could, again, I could see some Boros brewer come up with something goofy that'll surprise people. So you never know.
Right. Academy Rector lines
Yeah,
and
that
whatnot.
one.
Yeah. Moving on, number 7. Soulless Jailer. This is one we went back and forth on a little bit. We rated it kind of low to begin with, and then we kind of started thinking about it, like maybe a little higher. Again, our scale is subjective. Your mileage may vary, but the first round of discussion I saw about this as soon as it was spoiled was that it is the quote unquote fair and balanced Drannith Magistrate. And we all know how much of a fuck Drannith Magistrate is. So, same mana cost, 2 mana. In this case, it's 2 generic instead of 1 and a white. Body type, very similar. Drannith is a 1/3. This is a 0/4. Both have the same clauses, essentially. Drannith is worded, players can't play cards from anywhere but their hand. This is more like Weathered Runestone or Grafdigger's Cage, but also affects exile. So it's kind of in a weird space between the two of them. But essentially, this is fair and balanced for people because you can still play your commander. And it's also colorless, so it doesn't have to be played in white decks. It can be played in any deck. Granted, if you're playing a white deck, you probably don't play this unless you're just going to go heavy on every Stax Hate Bear you can get to have redundancies. But generally, this is probably just going in sans white decks that want Stax pieces. So it says permanent cards in graveyards can't enter the battlefield. That's just permanent. It's not creatures. It's not this. It's not that. It's permanent. So that's a lot. And then also, players can't cast non-creature spells from graveyards or exile. So anything with flashback, your underworld breaches, any of those things are done.
Yep.
Cards can't be reanimated. That's done.
Yep.
And any impulsive draw from like Prosper or anyone else that's doing that sort of thing, mostly red, those cards can't be cast. Or it affects Cascade as well, because those things get put into exile and then cast. It affects Rebound. It affects pretty much anything that ever puts a card in exile. You can't cast that anymore.
Unless it's a
So
creature.
that's exactly the same thing that Drannith does. Well, yeah, true. You can still food chain through this, I suppose.
Which is relevant.
That is relevant. But food chain isn't really relevant currently.
Boo. Disagree. Anyway.
I mean, I agree and I disagree both, because I've played food chain many a time. I currently own a food chain deck. I've owned other food chain decks, but there's just other strategies I would prefer to play. Whatever the case, this is the fair and balanced Drannith Magistrate you can play in your Groll deck to try and combat the player in your pod that plays white all the time. And
yeah, this is definitely the toy that Drannith Magistrate played with growing up or something. I will say that we talked about you can cast your commanders through this. There are exceptions to that, and Izlain as I Jesus Christ, can't talk Izlain and I discussed this. You can't cast your backgrounds if you're in background pairings. You can't cast your Planeswalker commanders. That's huge.
That fucks up Tavesh and Jeska, and those
time.
are a good chunk of the format.
Big time.
Not too many other, it fucks up Chainveil to Fairy too, but yeah. I mean, most of the other Planeswalkers that can be your commander don't get played, but shutting off Tavesh, like, he's everywhere, and so is Jeska.
Right.
And the backgrounds, not a lot of people are playing those in cEDH that I've seen. You obviously, and if you guys didn't see last week's video, you could see more of that. But I wanted to brew in that space, and I did brew in that space, but I found that I enjoyed playing them more in the competitive popper scene. I have a few decks that are running background stuff, but that was just because a lot of the uncommon ones seem to be like up my alley, whereas some of the higher rare ones weren't. I mean, I think the ones you're playing are uncommon too, aren't they?
One's a rare, one's an uncommon.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, either way, backgrounds are not something I've seen like completely take over the format, but they're out there, and this does shut off the background portion, and more notably the Planeswalkers. So it's it's an effective piece, and I think it will see play.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is another card for Winota right here, because it doesn't stop those creatures from ETBing, and it's an 0/4, and it's not a human, so it can turn sideways probably without dying. And yeah, we all know Winota loves
Winota just cares about attacking. It doesn't care if you actually do damage, so that is notable, that even though it's a 0/4, and it's just a beefy blocker for pretty much everything in the format outside of anything that's Crom or bigger. Moving on, number 6, this one's yours.
So this one is Mercurial Spelldancer. It's 1 blue and 1 for a 2/1 Phyrexian rogue. Mercurial Spelldancer can't be blocked. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put an oil counter on the Spelldancer. This is the first card we've looked at with oil counters. Whenever Mercurial Spelldancer deals combat damage to a player, you may remove 2 oil counters from it. If you do, when you cast your next instant or sorcery spell this turn, copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. So this one, I mean, it's a wall of text. I think this one,
that's
honestly,
a mouthful.
This one could be boom or bust. This could be the best card in the entire set for the format, or it could be super fringe in like 2 deck lists. But
I honestly see it going directly into Edric because of one card in particular. Well, not only is it an unblockable, which Edric already plays, it's also low to the ground, which Edric likes. It's going to draw you your cards, but being able to get in and, obviously you got to attack a couple times, or I'm sorry, you got to cast a couple spells to get the counters on there to be able to do it. But if you've done that and then you get the extra turn spell and you cast it, you copy it, you get 2 extra turns off 1 extra turn spell, and Edric already doesn't fucking need that. So that's just busted. This is an A+ slam dunk S tier for Edric.
Yeah.
However, it's also a rogue.
Right.
So they play the Notorious Throng or whatever it is that's got the prowl cost that is cheaper based on if you hit with a rogue or something, something to that effect. Whatever the case. Or I think you had to have attacked with the rogue, which Edric is, but this is just another card that can do that without Edric even being on the field. And you get your extra turn, and then you also get to copy it. So that's where this card goes. I think also in any sort of spell slingy deck, Niv Mizzet might like this because it's just swing in and then double mystical tutor, or pretty much anything. There's Teamer Spellslinger decks. There's Jeskai Spellslinger decks.
I think Tymna Malcolm will play this a lot because drawing cards with a Tymna, with this being unblockable, is excellent. They're obviously spell heavy, so they'll probably be able to copy. And if you copy a Demonic Tutor, good game. It's over.
Right.
Malcolm will give it mana.
You literally just go Yeah, you just get your consult Thasas and you're
Yeah,
done.
A plus B and game over. Yeah, this card is. I think this one will be a very very powerful card from the set. But again, we'll see. I mean, it is a 2-mana 2/1 that has to turn sideways in combat, so you're not doing anything with it the turn it comes down, other than maybe throwing some wall
I
counters on it.
still
So
think, like, I think this could even be seen play in like Najila. Like, it's just good. The ability to copy, like, people automatically think like, oh, I'm going to copy the biggest, most busted spell I have. Like, I'm going to peer into the abyss twice. Like,
mhm.
yeah, sure, that's great, and you can, and you're going to have like almost your whole deck in your hands, and that's pretty good. But just two brainstorms, eh, two brainstorms not bad, not great. You're only digging one extra card. Two ponders though, you could shuffle twice and draw two cards.
Do
You
Swords
could
to
also just
Plowshares.
potentially draw two cards. I mean, yeah,
Yeah,
two removal spells, two tutors, two bounce spells to get rid of both of the fucking stacks pieces that are stopping you from doing what you want to do.
right,
Yeah, I mean, it's got a lot of edge cases and it's got a lot of straight up, like, this just does powerful stuff. So
right.
I don't have a list in particular that I run that I'm thinking about putting it in, but I'm sure there's something there. I just gotta look.
Yeah. The big downside to this card, by the way, besides being that you need to go to combat and deal combat damage to do anything, um, the fact that you can't double up a counter spell on an opponent's turn, you're not going to help. This isn't going to help you win a counter spell war on your opponent's
No,
turn if you're trying to stop their win. So that's a little bit of a downside, but you know,
I
is what
mean,
it is.
this is gonna go into decks that aren't doing counterspell wars. This is gonna go into decks that are creature heavy and that wanna uh they want to get that extra, maybe not even creature heavy, but they want to get that extra value off of spells cast, not necessarily counter spells, and they're already going to have the counter spells in their hand. They don't care because
Yeah.
they're already running Rhystic Studies and Mystic Remorse and whatever, and they're already drawing the cards they need to have the interaction. This is for their payoffs. This is for their tutors and everything else. And if you look at it that way, it's very good. If you look at it as like, oh, we can't double count it, well, you don't. You probably shouldn't look at it that way. I don't think.
And it is blue, so you can throw it away to a force of negation or force of will if you need to. So there you
Right. If you are in a board state where you're just like, this thing's just going to instantly die, or, people have been board wiping, like, you just pitch it. So I think it's pretty good. Next one is a mono green artifact. Number 5. It's Conduit of Worlds. This is an artifact for 2 and 2 green. It says you may play lands from your graveyard. So notably, this is 1 more mana than Crucible of Worlds and Remnant of Excavator, which I believe are the only 2 cards that see play really that can do that effect. There may be others, but I'm not thinking of them off the top of my head. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I think those are the main 2 that see any play in cEDH. Yeah.
So it is a mana more, but I think that people's minds have been changed over the last couple years, in particular, about, like, cEDH decks used to be like, if it's over 3 CMC, like, you don't play it. And I think 4 and 5 CMC has kind of started to see more play, and then obviously the bigger spells like Peer and other ones that are just outrageously costed, but they do such a good thing that people will play them. Regardless, it is a consideration that if you're in a particular deck and you want to keep your curve super low because you are running Adnaz or something, this is a bigger hit. But if you're also looking, like maybe Gitrog, because Gitrog likes these kinds of effects, but you're also running Adnaz, so maybe this is putting you kind of at that place where you're going to hurt yourself too much and you don't want to. That's fine. But decks that want this kind of effect are probably going to play this. But more importantly is that it, instead of just being what Ramanap and Crucible are, in that there are effects that just let you play lands from your graveyard, this also has an upside, which that extra mana is probably worth paying for. You can tap this and choose a non-land permanent in your graveyard, and if you haven't cast a spell this turn, you can cast that card. But if you do, you can't cast any more spells that turn, and you can only activate this as a sorcery. So basically, once per turn, you can what's the term Underworld Breach uses? Escape. Once per turn, it's not really flashback because flashback exiles. So this is more of like an escape. So once per turn in your potentially mono green deck, you can escape a card. You can't cast anything else before or after, but just being able to say, okay, these kinds of lists, like say an Omnath or something, they depend on landfall. That's why you would put this in your deck, is because you're a landfall style deck or something that where lands matter. So in that case, you're going, okay, I can play my fetch land, I can sack it. I have some other effect that gives me another land drop, like exploration or whatever. So you play your land drop, you fetch, you get that land, and then you replay that fetch, and then you play it again. And you're now getting triggers off your Omnath or whatever other cards you have that are giving you those triggers. You've also ramped by a couple, and you haven't cast any spells yet, but you've gotten all this value. And you're like, I don't have shit in my hand, but I do have that Assassin's Trophy in my graveyard, and I want to blow up that thing. And
I
you
think it
just
only
tap
lets you
this.
cast, I think it only lets you cast permanents though, right?
Oh, it is non-land permanents. I'm sorry. Okay, so scratch that. But you look and you go, okay, well, they killed my what was the card we talked about earlier? My
The Mercurial
Canker
Spellmancer.
Bloom. My
Yeah.
Canker Bloom. They killed it, and I want it back so I can blow up something else. So bam, bam, you get it back, and now this becomes kind of a recursion for anything that isn't a spell. So you can get back artifacts or creatures or enchantments, and that's pretty good. I mean, if nothing else, if you are in a deck that is running Underworld Breach, this gets you back your Underworld Breach after somebody fucking counters it. And you're just like, okay, that's cool. I'm gonna cast my Underworld Breach this turn. Like,
But then
and
you
it's
can only,
not exiled, so if it does get countered again, it just goes back in your grave and you can try again next turn. So
problem though
this
is
is
if
kind of a
you
failsafe for a lot of stuff.
if you cast Underworld Breach with it though, you can't cast anything else. That's a problem.
Sure, that's a bad example, but you understand what I'm saying in the
Sure.
sense of like Underworld Breach, bad example, but you can get your Dockside back. You can get back
Yeah.
whatever game-breaking thing you have in your graveyard that isn't a spell back, or
Yeah, your
recur
displacer
Sax Piece,
kitten,
or
yeah. I think this will live in and the one spell per turn kind of clause in some kind of a like a Selesnya, like a Yasharn or something where they're playing rule of law type effects. This card is just bonkers. If I'm in some kind of destructive rule
honestly,
of
this
law,
might go into my
gross.
Sithis list. Now that
Yeah,
we're
you never
talking
know.
about it, I could potentially slot this into my Sithis list, even though I am very heavy on artifact hate and I only run a couple artifacts. It is still the kind of thing where almost any deck in cEDH runs like what 5 to like 7 or 8 fetch lands.
Yeah.
I think on average you're on like 5, even if
Yeah.
you're only in 2 or 3 color. So you're on quite a few fetch lands. So just being able to replay the fetch lands and get the value off of them is good. But then having the ability to recur stuff, and in Sithis, like they blow up an enchantment that I need, or for a great example, there's the white one and the green one that both say sack this, destroy target artifact or enchantment. I can do that, recur it, and do it again
Yeah.
because it's not casting another spell. So I mean, essentially, you can. I actually can see good arguments for putting this in that list now that we're talking about it. So, yeah, if you think about it for a while, you'll find some places for this. I think it's gonna mostly live in Lands Matter decks.
Yeah.
But I mean, dude, you know how many times people have blown up my Gaia's Cradle or my Sarah Sanctum, and just being able to replay them from the yeah,
On
this is
top
going in
of being able
Sithis.
to cast,
This is going in Sithis for sure. Like the artifact hate that I have is bad, so like being able to activate it is going to be kind of rough sometimes. But even just getting that value of the extra fetch lands or getting your Gaia's Cradle back, that's pretty fucking good.
Yeah, I mean, I think this one. So I have a friend that has a very competitive Titania deck, and that just mud hole stomps. He has a mono green Staxy build. This is like his wet dream come true, being able to play this card right here. Like you said, lands matter, but in those grindy mid range games, which is kind of where our format's heading, just being able to cast, your Mystic Remora, you don't want to pay for it, let it die. Then hey, I'll tap it and recast Mystic Remora from the grave.
I mean, that's a
Right?
great fucking argument right there.
Right?
You can have a 1-mana Mystic Remora like 8 turns in a row if you really wanted to.
If you need to, yeah. I mean, if it's going to a long grindy game, just you never know, man. This thing has some sick potential.
Or they force a will your heuristic study and then you just bring it back.
Yeah,
That's awesome. There are a lot of okay. So when you first pointed that one out to me, I was like, I totally breezed over that one because that didn't seem worthwhile at all. And now the more we talk about it, I'm like, holy shit, that's really good.
Yeah,
That's
and
really good.
I've seen no one else talk about this card, so maybe we're just absolutely crazy and wrong. But I see a lot of potential in this card. So
There's a lot of upside there, for sure. This next one you're really excited about, so I'm gonna let you take it away. This is number 4.
yeah. So Unctus Grand Metatect. It's 2 blue and 1 for a 2/4 legendary artifact creature, Phyrexian Vidalcan. It reads, other blue creatures you control have, whenever this creature becomes tapped, draw a card, then discard a card. So looter. And other artifact creatures you control get +1/+1, artifact lord. Phyrexian blue, until end of turn, target creature you control becomes a blue artifact in addition to its other colors and types. Activate only as a sorcery. So this thing, I'm a big fan. I know there's a lot of people that are really boom or bust on this card, saying this has got potential. This could be cEDH, third best blue commander or whatever they say. And there are a lot of people that say it's so telegraphed, it's terrible. I fall in I think this has a lot of potential. There's several one card creatures that let you loot through your entire library, like a Feto Alchemist is the most notable, obviously, but or you can loot through your entire library, then just cast a Thassa's Oracle that you loot into. I mean, it's got
Yeah.
potential.
So there's a couple things that I would point out that are notable about this that I saw. One is that the activated ability is Phyrexian mana. So this reads, that ability itself reads just like Grand Architect, which is a long ago known combo that combos with Pilipala, which you had to pay a blue instead of life. So that's notable that you don't need the mana. Uh, but you had to pay a blue to make Pilipala blue to end of turn, and then basically like untap it to make a blue to tap it to then untap it to make a blue, and you essentially ended up with infinite mana. So just that alone, I was intrigued because it was like, okay, this is Grand Abolisher, but it's, I'm sorry,
Grand Architect.
Grand Architect, Grand Abolisher. Until I play white more often than blue. So this is a Grand Architect on a body that's legendary because the Grand Architect is not. But you could also run Grand Architect in the list and still do the Pilipala thing in case this guy's got so much commander tax on him, you're fucked. I would also argue, to your point about it being telegraphed, Orvar was telegraphed as fuck, and the second Orvar was spoiled, I was like, dude, this list is so fucking cool. I built a version, and then everybody built versions, and they got on the database, and I think it's still on the database, and it's very convoluted and does a bunch of different shit that's just, it plays a lot of really shitty cards to where, like, it just never felt good. Most of the time, the cards felt dead because you play Orvar and people just kill Orvar, and then you're like, fuck. This is kind of the same thing, but you can go a couple different ways with this, because you have the ability to just make every fucking creature you control a looter, which is just insane.
Right.
I like, it's kind of like Catilda. Like Catilda was a Selesnya. Every human you control is a dork, and that's pretty cool. Asika does the same thing, but only with legendary creatures. That was also kind of cool. This is like the next step of that, where it's just like, all right, now every card you fucking control just taps, and it's very much like a zombie, but you don't need them to be wizards.
Right.
Like it's basically in a zombie list, just you don't have to care if they're wizards.
Yeah.
And a zombie was just draw, but still, you could still do the same intruder alarm and enter the infinite, and what's the one where you uh something hall, dream halls, where you can just cash
Get
it
your
for
card to
free,
cast
and
it and stuff. Yeah, all sorts of
there's
weird
so many.
stuff.
I have PTSD from a guy that used to play a super competitive like Azami back in the day when we were all still barely upgraded precons, and like, yeah. But regardless, this is doing that kind of thing. But you could also lean into the fact that you could play like nothing but artifact creatures, and they're all bigger now.
Yep.
Notably, there are some in this set that have toxic, so they're a little bit bigger to get through to actually get the combat damage in. So yeah, I mean, there's some different things, but overall, it's a 2/4, which makes it
Bulletproof.
beefy enough to withstand any most damage based board wipes, and then also most spot removal outside of swords and things. So I mean, it's got the ability to take damage. It's a good blocker.
Yeah.
Giving, I mean, there's some pretty good artifact creatures too. There's that like triplicate. What you call it? There's a few that have come out in the last few years that are big ass 9/9s that break up into 3/3s, and then there's Wormcoil Engine, and there's a lot of things that are like, they're kind of expensive, but you can also start doing affinity stuff with this. You can do Urza Tron lands and whatnot. Like,
it's got
got
potential.
potential for sure.
The big thing about this one that I really like too is it's similar to, and I keep bringing it up, but the perfect example is a Winota, where Winota doesn't have to attack to get any of its triggers. Adeline doesn't have to attack to get its triggers. This one doesn't have to tap or do anything. It's your other creatures that are going to trigger this. So you can, play your untapper or just an artifact creature you're going to turn sideways, like a containment construct or something, and then slam this, and then boom, you attack, you get your value right away. So,
well, also if you
awesome.
can do, I mean, obviously Dramatic Reversal just makes it to where you just draw your whole deck, right?
Yeah, there's a ton of different ways to, and
all of your creatures loot for you, so you don't even need the extra mana. You don't even need mana. You just need enough. How much does Dramatic Reversal cost? It's 2 off Isochron to cast whatever it is. So you literally just need 2 rocks and an Isochron with Dramatic Scepter on it, or Dramatic Reversal on it, and you tap those. They untap along with all your creatures. You loot. You do it again, you loot, you do it again. I mean, at some point, you're going to want to cast some of the spells in your hand, or you just loot until you've got Thassa's in your hand, and it doesn't matter. And at the end, you use that 2 mana. Hopefully, they're both blue off your rocks, and then, or you saved an island.
Yeah,
it's definitely got potential.
I've seen arguments for people playing like the Epheto Alchemist, where you can just loot through your entire library, and playing a Shuffle Titan, so you can loot through your whole library until you hopefully keep enough cards in hands where you can cast a Lotus Petal, cast it, sack it, add a blue, then loot all the way through, shuffle them all back in, draw it again, play it again. I mean, you'll go down in cards each time you do that, but there are ways around that too. There's Gush, there's whatever. There's a ton of different options. Containment Construct is definitely a solid.
Got all of your Eldrazi Shufflers.
Yeah, so there's all sorts of crazy stuff. Echo of Aeons is an option, I think. There's
Time Twister.
Yeah, there's a ton of different options you can play. This has got potential to go a billion different ways, and I think it's going to be fun.
Yeah, no, I definitely think it's good. I don't know that it's like top end, top tier, but I don't think any monocolor list really is. I mean, I know that like Magda has won some tournaments and other cards too, but generally speaking, I put higher color tiers higher up generally because that's just kind of how it works. But I think this is going to be able to sit at comp tables and whatnot. Who knows? You guys might see it in action. Actually, guarantee you'll see it in action sometime later this month. So keep an eye out for
sure.
Next one up is number 3. We're in the top 3, folks. This one, I don't know necessarily that it deserves to be top 3. This one I don't really care about, but it is something that I think people do care about, so we wanted to talk about it. It's just not in my wheelhouse. This is the new version of Tyvar, Jubilant Brawler. So it's another Tyvar Planeswalker. We got a mono green one back in Kaldheim, I believe. He was kind of cool for Elf Ball decks because he provided black mana to normally, a mono green kind of list. So he was kind of cool, but that was very niche. You needed to be playing Elf Ball for him to work. This one is not so niche. It's 1, a black and a green, comes in with 3 loyalty. It has the blanket, which started basically with War of the Spark, getting the passive effects on Planeswalkers. This says you may activate abilities of creatures you control as though those creatures had haste. So it's a, what is that? 1,000-year elixir.
Yep.
On a Planeswalker. That alone would probably be good enough. Like without even any loyalty abilities, it would probably be good enough because it's just another card like that. And if you're playing something like, say, Hermit Druid, that's fucking amazing because the biggest weakness of a Hermit Druid list is that you have to play the creature and you have to wait a turn cycle and hope it lives before you get to activate. And Hermit Druid players will tell you that happens often enough to where they consistently still play the deck, and you win some, you lose some, blah blah blah. But in this case, you can just slam this guy down and then slam down your Hermit Druid and just go. And if nobody's got anything, you got it. But he does have a couple other abilities, both of which are potentially pretty good. So his +1 is untap up to 1 target creature. So, obviously untap shenanigans can be abused. If you can flicker this guy, you can potentially do that over and over again. You're probably not doing that with stuff like Cloudstone, but there are ways to reset a Planeswalker so you can continue to use its abilities. So that's something that somebody's going to figure out how to do. And then the -2 is mill 3 cards, and then you may return a creature card with mana value 2 or less from graveyard to the battlefield. Notably to the battlefield, not to hand. That's pretty powerful, but most cards that are creatures that are 2 or less, I mean, you could get back your Esper, your Dockside, your Ragavan, your Dothi, most of your Hate Bears, Drannith, etc. So, I mean, it can get back stuff. Obviously, that we're not talking about these colors in particular, but maybe if you're in a list with more colors, there's going to be more options. But perhaps you have a combo piece that, is around that 2 CMC mark, and that's good enough. That's probably the ability that's being used the least. Most of the time, I think you're going to have him as a Elixir of Immortality. I'm sorry, 1,000-year Elixir on the battlefield, and you're going to continuously be upticking him so that he doesn't die, and you're just going to either untap stuff for pseudo vigilance, or untapping dorks to just retap to get more mana, that sort of thing. What do you think?
See, I think the -2 ability is probably the most pertinent ability on the whole damn card, and that's because it's going to turn your Vamp Tutors, your Worldly Tutors, your Imperial Seal into Hermit Druid, who then you dump in the grave, recur with haste, and win. I mean, you can also get back
I didn't even fucking think about that. Like so, but, as I said, not in my wheelhouse. This is definitely not something I put much thought into. This is a total card I'm
in love with. I think this one might be the strongest card in the set. I think for me, it's probably top 2. It's probably this and Mercurial Spelldancer might be the top 2 cards in the set, outside of my boy Unctus. But this card I think is bonkers. I think like Timna Thrasios will definitely try this if they're in the Hermit Druid lines. The 5-color Sisay might play this also. I mean, this card's really, really, really good, I think. And turning all those top deck tutors into putting them into the battlefield is with haste. It's not haste because they can't attack, but like you said, even getting back a Dothi Voidwalker and having that thing active right away. If there's
it is haste if they're an activated creature.
Yeah,
like you said, with Hermit Druid specifically, it's just play this guy. Neg 2, play this guy, cast Vamp Tutor, neg to him, put him on the field, activate, go.
Win. Yeah.
And that is probably the most direct line and the best thing that it's got going for it. I'm sure there are other activated ability creatures in the colors or in, plus color decks that could do the same sort of thing. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. But again, like I said, this is not my wheelhouse. So,
I mean, even just getting back, like Witherbloom Apprentice, for instance, and stuff like that. This thing has it gets back a lot of the big hitters in the format that are going to win you the game. So you play them, they get countered. You play this, you recur it.
Witherbloom is. I thought Witherbloom was 3.
It's black and a green.
Is it only 2? Oh, fuck! I haven't played Witherbloom in a minute.
I've died to it more times than I care to admit.
No, I mean, I've used it lots in Chain of Smog, but for some reason I was thinking it was the same cost as him. Okay, number 2.
The last one for me to talk about is the new Atraxa Grand Unifier. Oh boy, this one's a wall of text. So it's 3 and then green, white, blue, black for a 7/7. So 7 mana for a 7/7. It's a legendary creature, Phyrexian Angel. It's got flying, vigilance, death touch, and lifelink, so keyword soup. And when Atraxa Grand Unifier enters the battlefield, reveal the top 10 cards of your library. For each card type, you may put a card of that type from among the revealed cards into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. That's a lot of words. This one...
So, notably, it's... it's basically Atraxa again, because the original Atraxa was flying, vigilance, death touch, lifelink, which was supposed to represent those 4 colors. I don't remember. I think it was a 5/5, 6/6 before.
The original ones, I think it's a 4/4. I could be wrong. It's been
Yeah, yeah,
I
you
don't
might be
cast
right.
it, so I don't think I've
And then
ever
it
played it.
obviously
So.
dealt with proliferation, which
Right.
honestly would have been better for this set,
Would have
but
made more sense for this set.
here we
Yeah,
are.
go figure, right? So yeah, this card right here, it's going to be a 4-color. I think a lot of people are speculating that if they build it, a 4-color food chain enabler, because it doesn't necessarily win out of the command zone when you cast it, repeatedly with your food chain shenanigans, but it's going to draw the rest of your deck if you so choose. So therefore, you can win. You can blink this thing. It doesn't have to be cast. It's got Displacer Kitten happens to be blue, which is in this color identity, which is gross. Yeah, you can't go all in. Like, so we Izlain and I talked. We both played or play Ukima Kazur as our as our food chain list. Pardon me. And this one, you can't go like just demonic consultation for food chain, slam food chain. Hopefully, exile one of your enablers for food chain and win, because you can't just win with this out of the command zone. You have to be careful not to exile your other win cons. So this one's like a little riskier to go that route. I mean, Tainted Pact can still do the thing, but this one, I think it's a lot of mana. It's a lot of mana to cast it, even with a food chain, because food chain, you still have to get to, one of your 3 mana or 4 mana enablers in these colors. But I think it's got some strong potential.
So, I mean, it's the one card that I saw people talking about as being relevant. I think it's comparable to kind of like that 5-color Niv-Mizzet, where it was like you had to build your deck with a bunch of multicolor cards that didn't necessarily lend themselves very well to like cEDH. It was kind of gimmicky. This feels kind of the same way. It has that whole vibe of like, I can slam this for value, in the sense of like, I play this, and getting to 7 mana on your first, like within the first 3 turns, is not unheard of.
Yeah.
I mean, I play Tivit. I have cast turn 1 Tivit. I've cast turn 2 Tivit. It's not difficult. He's 6 mana.
I've seen a turn 1 Tox roll hit the battlefield. Stuff happens.
Yeah, I mean, Tox Roll's a little easier to cast because it's only black. I'm talking like multi pips. Esper +3. This is whatever the fuck that is, Witchmaw, I think, +3. So it's 1 more mana. I've done Tivit turn 1. However, Tivit is just like, instantly get value, and then if you have a tutor, you just go get Time Thief and you just fucking win. This is like, yeah, I got value out of it. It's a 7/7, which is no slouch. Like, that's 3 hits on anybody, they're dead. And if you can target, honestly, I think you could probably play this as like a stacks deck.
Yeah.
With food chain, with other 2 to 3 card combos that go in these colors. Obviously, you don't get Breach or Dockside or any of that stuff, so making the extra mana is a little more difficult, but you could potentially slow the game down and slam this for value. Look through the top 10 cards of your library, potentially get, 2 to 4 cards in your hand.
Easily.
If you kind of balance it properly. And then, so you're getting some card advantage. And then you have a 7/7 flying, vigilance, death touch, lifelink. So you have a blocker, you have an attacker. Pretty much everything in the format is not 7/7.
Yeah.
For the most part. I mean, like, you're worried about Dargo maybe, but you have flying, so you don't have to worry about Dargo. And then anything that blocks you just dies. And anything that blocks you, you also gain life. So there's potential for like Aether Flux Reservoir kind of style stuff too, to where like, this is supporting your life link, and you could potentially start lasering down people and don't have to worry about it as much. But yes, the thing that this lends itself to the best is food chain, and it is a loop of, okay, get the creature, get the food chain, loop that until you've got infinite mana, cast this a bunch of times, basically filter through your deck and get your stuff. You probably are going to want to run Elixir of Immortality or a Shuffler, so that you can continue to do it, Time Twister, etc. Stuff where you can make sure that you don't deck yourself and fuck yourself. And you can eventually get to a 2-card combo. Honestly, being in white too, I think the thing that you need to do here is that you shuffle through your deck so much to where you can actually play a Grand Demolisher. So now nobody can interact with you, or a Silence or something to that effect. and then you just consult win.
Yeah, well,
It
and
doesn't matter.
if you can go the food chain route with this, you don't even need consult. You just cast it over and over until you put your whole deck in your hand, and then cast that Oracle from hand with your food chain mana.
Sure, you can do
Yeah.
that. You can also get to the point where you're just like, I have infinite mana for creatures. Play every creature in the deck out. Finale for X equals a billion. Food chain doesn't allow you to do that, so I guess you can't. X is a billion, but you can put out your whole
Whole
party
slew
out
of
and
creatures. Yeah, I mean, this has got a
yeah.
lot of potential. I can see somebody doing some weird Adnaz stuff with this because the lifelink might be relevant, although it's not a great payoff for an Adnaz deck. I think you're right. Food chain, maybe a Staxy build. As you mentioned, Grand Abolisher, Silence, Ranger Captain, even the Blue White Teferi are all things that are probably going to see play with a list like this. And yeah, it's got
Yeah,
good
you could
potential.
definitely do 3 fairy with Displacer Kitten.
Yeah, for sure.
You could, I mean, you could probably even I mean, weird, but you could probably even polymorph with this if you
Yeah,
really
for sure.
wanted to, and just use her as a way to try to find the polymorph, and then polymorph into your uh your tide spout or your Hullbreaker horror. But probably not the best usage. Again, this is another commander where we really wanted to talk about it because it's the first 4-color commander since the last Omnath, and prior to that, the only other ones were printed with the 2016 commanders, where the original Atraxa came in. So I was kind of excited to see a new 4-color commander. When it turned out to be Atraxa, I was less excited because I would rather have red than green. And it's just it feels very casual. It feels not good enough. People are going to try and break it, but I honestly would not play this. I don't think it's good enough. But I'm also running. Not only did I do Okima Kazur, which I don't have together anymore, I'm running Old Rutstein now, which is just Golgari. Only have Eldrazi, whatever the fuck it is, and it's arguably one of the worst food chain decks ever, but the artwork reminded me so much of the merchant from Resident Evil 4, which I know you're not a gamer, but it was a big deal for me. So it's got a kind of a soft spot, and it's kind of janky, and it is what it is. This is janky too, so jank builders, fucking prove me wrong. Make this shit good. I'm sure you can. I do still want to firmly argue that the old Atraxa is probably better to be building around right now just because of Toxic. And in fact, like, just the proliferate on that every turn is probably the best thing that you're going to do. And you get basically, I don't even know if there are any red cards with Infect. I think they are all in those 4 colors.
I think there's red within.
I know
could
for
be
a fact
wrong.
there's white, there's blue, there's black, and there's green. I don't know that there's any red.
I think
There
there's a red
should
one
be
with First
but
Strike or something, but I could be absolutely wrong. But yeah, it is a weird
maybe a
flavor
sliver or
miss.
something. Yeah,
Yeah, there is a weird flavor miss here that they didn't put the proliferate in this set. Yeah, that's bizarre.
right. Like, it's like you already had this character that already did proliferate, and you put it in a set where proliferate is a thing and needs to be a thing.
Yeah.
Honestly, just go play the old one.
I mean, they
Like,
could have
if you
put.
want to brew this, go ahead, but play the old one.
Nah, I like this better. But they could have put literally like flying vigilance, proliferate as the 2 keywords, and it would have made more sense. But whatever. Of note, this one when it lists the card types, it lists battle, which is something that hasn't been seen before to my knowledge, and I don't know if they've spoiled it
No.
yet or not. To me, it looks like it's replacing a specific keyword that had been there before, which is tribal, because tribal is noticeably missing on this card. So that's my guess. I don't know if that's right or wrong.
So there's literally no card in the set. The whole set's been spoiled. There's no card in the set because that was a thing people talked about. It was that it mentions battle in the rules text, but then there was not a whole in the whole entirety of the set. There was nothing that referenced battle. So perhaps in the this may be future proofing for the March of the Machines.
Could
Maybe
be, but
there's going to be some kind of battle mechanic or battle card type.
could be. But again,
Maybe
it
it's going to be
doesn't.
something like conspiracy, but it's like actually legal in internal formats.
Sure, but I mean, it doesn't list tribal as a card type there, which makes me think it's just the updated verbiage for that mechanic. Who knows? I could be wrong.
Could yeah, maybe. There's a lot of speculation there. We will see. Either way, let's move on to our number one.
What do you got as number
Number
one, Izlain?
one.
This is the card Izlain's way more excited about than I am, but it is. I'll concede it's going to be an interesting card to see. So
This is a card that is definitely going to see play in lots of different lists. May even be a commander itself, just because it does a thing that color actually likes. It was the card that I was most excited for, only because I could see myself slotting it into multiple lists that I already play. Outside of some of the other ones where I'm like, maybe, but this one was a definite. I've already got it on the considering for many of them. All of that bullshit aside, it's the new Elish Norn. It is Elish Norn, Mother of Machines, or Mom, as we are referring to her now. Mother of Runes has been relegated to like Grandma or something at this point. This is the new Mom. It's 4 generic and a white. 4/7. Same power toughness she had before. She is still a Phyrexian Praetor. She still has vigilance. Instead of giving the +2/+2 buff to your creatures and the -2/-2 neg to everybody else, she now has the same sort of idea, but it's done differently. If a permanent entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. That's essentially Panharmonicon. Second line of text, permanents entering the battlefield don't cause abilities of permanents your opponents control to trigger. That's Torpor Orb. So this is a Panharmonicon and a Torpor Orb stapled together on a 4/7 Vigilance body for 5 mana. 5 mana, again, as we were saying earlier, the metric that like 3 mana is pretty much as far, maybe 4 is as far as you want to go in a cEDH deck. That's gone out the window. We have so many mana enablers at this point that it's not a thing. Dockside makes it to where you don't care. You can cast huge spells. Rituals, other things, just Storm in general, the ability to just go off and do whatever the fuck you want to do is very much more prevalent now than it used to be. So casting this, especially, it's only 1 white pip, so you need literally a Plains, a Soul Ring, and a Mana Crypt, and you cast her easy. If you're running Jeweled Lotus because she's your commander, you need a land, a rock, and a Jeweled Lotus, or 2 lands and a Jeweled Lotus. Either way, very easy to cast. It again, a big relevant body. Any Stacks deck that is running Staxy cards, your Sharns, and other things, this fits right in. For me, it's going into pretty much every deck that I run white stacks in, because this is a Torpor Orb effect that's asymmetrical, and Torpor Orb is not, and neither are any of the ones like Hushring Griff, Hushbringer, Tocatli Honor Guard. Like, all of those are symmetrical, so they fuck you too. And you usually only play those because you're not playing anything with ETB, so you don't care. But there are decks where you might be playing a bunch of stacks and you have ETBs. Like my Sithis list is a good example. I don't run Torpor Orb because I don't want to shut off my own ETBs because I have enough of them to where that matters. In this case, I can slam this in, still have the Torpor Orb effect, and then any of my ETBs also get doubled. So if I slam a Moonblessed Cleric, I can go 2 her up. Well, in that case, probably not, because it's top of library and they shuffle. But generally, most ETBs, you can get a secondary effect, or a doubling effect. So any list that's running a ton of ETBs is going to want this, because you're going to get that bonus. But you're also going to be shutting off everybody else's ETBs. So this shuts off Docksize. It shuts off Thassa's Oracle. It also shuts off the stuff they already have on the field that would get value from other ETBs.
My problem with this card, I'll start there. There's already a billion stops ETB effects that are really good that cost a lot less to cast. And
but again, not asymmetrical.
Not asymmetrical, but if you're playing those effects, there's a very good chance you're playing multiple of them and you're not playing very many or any ETBs in your own deck, except for maybe a Dockside that you're like, hey, if I draw it out of sync, so be it, right? So I don't see this being played.
That was my point, though, is that you play this in lists where you do have ETBs that you don't want to shut off, but you want to shut off other people's.
Sure.
And that has been a thing where I have literally like built a deck, been like, I want to put these Torpor Orb effects in, but the more cards I put into my deck, the more I'm seeing like this is gonna shut off so much of my list that I don't want to run this at all, and so I won't. And there's always a non-bow clause. Like I run collector oof in lists that I'm running a bunch of artifacts because sometimes you're just the last guy and everybody else has put the artifacts out and you're just like, fuck it, I'm gonna tutor for this oof and shut everybody off and I don't care about my own artifacts. That's fine. And that's normal. The same thing goes for Torpor Orb, except for this is now the option for people who want Torpor Orb in their list but don't want to shut off their own shit. And I think that's what makes it very good.
Being a big, huge body that can swing is not bad. When you're shutting off ETBs, you're shutting off some of the instant speed format or the big win cons of the format. So you're probably buying time where that damage is going to stack up and really get somewhere on him. I mean, I can definitely see this seeing play for a while. And again, they're not stopping printing cards. There's only going to be more ETB busted effects that we're going to want to stop from our opponents or double up our own, double dip on.
Right.
So I could definitely see that. I just don't know. Me personally, I don't have a list together that I have that this fits in yet. Now, that could change. And I could get mudhole stomped by this 6 or 7 games in a row and think, I severely underestimated that card. But for me, I don't think it's a slam dunk. So.
And, I'm sure that there's a lot of people that are going to feel the same way you do. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that are going to feel the same way I do. I like the asymmetrical part of it, and that's what sells it for me. If it was symmetrical, this is garbage. Because if it was symmetrical, it ends up being Hushwing, Grift, and Polygon Guard, and whatever, and they cost 2 to 3 mana instead of 5. Sure. And I automatically play those before that. Torpor Orb is 2 or 3, I can't remember.
It's
but
2.
It's
Love that
less.
Card.
Yeah. So all of those cards are less for the same effect. And if you are not playing enough ETBs for it to matter, absolutely play those cards over this, bar none. But if you're in a creature heavy list and you have creature tutors and you have a lot of ETBs, like being able to slam this down, it's no different than Yasharn. Like Yasharn shuts off some of your own shit too most of the time, but he just shuts everybody else off worse. So you play him. Yeah. And I play Yasharn in my Sithis list for that reason because like it shuts up. The only ETB he has is he gets a force and a planes.
Getting 2,
but that gets doubled by this.
Yeah, that wouldn't be the worst.
Right? So, I mean, that's not bad.
I could see a Rocco list playing this for sure, because Rocco's an ETB, right? It's not a cast, it's an ETB. I'm pretty sure it is.
I think you're right, yeah.
I could see them just slam dunking this, because that's what they're wanting already. Creatures, shutting off opponents' fast speed wins, and then just boom, look at this big thing that I'm going to win with.
Yeah, and I mean, this also could be the thing that makes, like, I know some people, there's been kind of a resurgence of Labman, because Thassa's can be shut off by certain things, and because the Jace Planeswalker is a little more expensive and intensive on the pips, so people have been playing Labman more often because it doesn't have any claws. It's there, and if you don't have any cards in your library and you try to draw, you win. So in that case, like, this could be the thing that also pushes Labman back into the spotlight. Yeah, not this necessarily, but like this with the combination of all those other things. Somebody really wants to go super hard on the ETB hate, your Thassa's isn't doing shit if it can't get that ETB.
Yeah, and one massive upside to this particular creature, notably for me, is good luck Gilding Draking it. You can't. It doesn't. Your Gilding Drake does nothing, which is awesome.
Right. Yeah. That it immediately hits the field and goes, oh,
right,
shit. I mean, arguably those other cards did that too, but this is a target that you'd actually want to hit with your Gilded Drake, and you can't. So, yeah. Obviously, like I said, out of our top 10, all of these cards, I would say the majority of them are going to see some kind of play. Some of it's going to be niche, some of it's going to be more widespread. I still think these are probably the best cards out of the set that could potentially see some cEDH play outside of our honorable mentions. Some of that was Pauper and whatnot. But do you have any closing thoughts? Otherwise, I think we pretty much are wrapped up here.
No, I mean, I'm excited to see what people come up with and brew. Being as Izlain and I both are brewers at heart, love seeing new stuff coming out. Love seeing people try new ideas and new decks, and I like being surprised by what people come up with. So I'm looking forward to somebody surprising me with a card we totally overlooked or misread or just didn't understand or whatever. And just I'm looking forward to it. That's the it's the Christmas every time a new set comes out. It's new shiny toys to play with and see what happens. And even though it happens all the
Right.
time now, but it's still fun.
There is a bit of an oversaturation in the market right now, but there is still only a certain percentage of cards that come out of each set that are good for various formats. So we are all kind of just picking through and finding the needles in the haystack. So I agree, there are probably cards that we overlooked or misread or misunderstood. As it is, some of these cards that you put on here, I was like, that doesn't seem that good. And then we started talking about it. I was like, oh, that's actually really good. So uh yeah, again, the community is going to find ways to make all of these things broken and do what they need to do
Heck yeah.
to figure it out. So um that's it for us here. I hope you guys enjoyed our discussion here. We will probably do this for most sets in the coming days and months and weeks and years. And
We look
there's
forward
always
to
a new
being
set to talk about.
we look forward to being right and we look forward to being wrong. So we'll see what happens. That's the excitement of this too. So
Please leave comments below and let us know if you think we got this right. If you think that something on here is just absolute trash, we don't care. We'll take your comments worth a grain of salt one way or the other. Just love to hear back from people about what we had to say here, and we'll be back in a couple weeks. Not sure exactly what the next topic is going to be, but we'll be surprised just as much as you are.
heck yeah.
All right, Kirk, thank you so much for hanging out, and we'll see you guys in a couple weeks. We'll be back with something spicy.
Take care,
Take care.
everybody.